Hello and welcome to today's lesson of virtual math class. Today we're going to be talking about angle measurements and parallel lines. Woo! Okay, enough of that. So the objective for today, students will be able to find the missing angle measurements when there are parallel lines cut by a transversal. And now remind me, what are parallel lines that are cut by a transversal? What does that look like? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the properties of parallel lines cut by a transversal. So we already learned about alternate interior angles, and alternate interior angles are congruent. And alternate exterior angles are also congruent to each other. And then when two angles form a straight line, they are supplementary, meaning they add up to 180 degrees. So supplementary means that two angles add up to 180 degrees and straight lines are 180 degrees. So vertical angles are also congruent. And just in case you forgot, congruent means that two angles have the same measurement. So if you forgot or you need a refresher about what alternate interior, alternate exterior angles are, please go back and watch the video from yesterday. And if you need help with supplementary angles or vertical angles, please go back and watch the video from last Tuesday. Okay, so now let's look at some examples. So our first example says, name two angles that are vertical. So remember that vertical angles are two angles that are opposite of each other that share the same vertex. So one example would be angle 5 and angle 8. Those two would be vertical to each other because they are opposite of each other and they both would share the same vertex. So what would another set of angles be that would be vertical? Okay, so now two angles that are supplementary. Supplementary means that they need to add up to 180 degrees or they need to form a straight line. So if we look at angle 3 and angle 4, those two angles, if we add them together, would form this straight line here. So this angle plus this angle add up to a straight line. So those would be supplementary. So angle 3 and angle 4. And what would another example of supplementary angles be? And now two angles that are alternate interior angles. So remember that interior means they need to be inside of the parallel lines. So one example would be angle 5. So if we use angle 5, opposite of angle 5 would be angles 3 and 4, but we need the angle that's opposite of the transversal line. And this line right here that cuts through the parallel lines is the transversal line. So angle 4 and angle 5 would be alternate interior angles. What would another set of alternate interior angles be? Now for alternate exterior angles. So exterior means they need to be outside. So if I choose angle 8, because angle 8 is outside of my parallel lines, the other angle that would be on the opposite side and on the opposite side of the transversal line would be angle 1. So my one example would be angle 8 and angle 1. Now, give me an example of angles that are congruent angles. And remember, if you refer back to the last slide and you can see which angles are congruent to one another. Okay, so now let's look at our first example. So it says, look at the diagram. We have parallel lines that are cut by a transversal. And it tells us that the measure of angle EFC equals 130 degrees. What is the what is the measurement of angle GFC? So first I'm going to look at angle EFC. So I have EFC that I'm looking at right here. So now they want to know the measurement of angle GFC. So if you see, those two angles create a straight line. and a straight line equals 180 degrees. So if that whole thing adds up to 180 degrees, if I do 180 degrees minus the 130 degrees that I was given for the measurement of angle EFC, 180 minus 130 would be 50 degrees. So the measurement, so if this equals 130 degrees, this angle would need to equal 50 degrees. So 50 would be our answer here. So now we again have parallel lines that are cut by a transversal, and it says that the measure of angle HGD is 110 degrees. What is the measure of angle CDG? So I start by looking at HGD, and it tells me that measure is 110 degrees. And then it asks me what the measure of CDG is. So I highlight CDG. What are those angles? Those are alternate interior angles, and alternate interior angles are congruent, meaning that they're the same size. So if this angle is 110, this angle will also be 110. Okay, let's look at this one. So we again have parallel lines that are cut by the transversal. And it says that the measure of angle PQN is 65 degrees. What is the measure of RQS? So I start by highlighting PQN, and it tells me that PQN is 65 degrees. So now I need to look at angle RQS. So what type of angles would these be? They are opposite of each other, and they both share point Q, the vertex point Q. So those would be vertical angles. And are vertical angles congruent? Yes, they are, which means if one of them is 65 degrees, the other will also be 65 degrees. So my answer here is 65 degrees. Okay, our last example, we again have parallel lines that are cut by the transversal, and it says that the measure of angle MLO is 117. What is the measure of POQ? So I'm going to start by highlighting MLO, and then I look at POQ. These measures, what kind of angles are these? Is it a type that we know? No, there's not a specific name for these, but these would be corresponding angles, which means that they're going to be the same size, which means that they're going to be congruent. So I can tell by looking that they are the same size. So my answer here would be 117 degrees. So sometimes it does get a little tricky. Most of the angles we know, and we know the name for them, but these ones we haven't necessarily gone over, but these would be corresponding angles and they would be congruent. So another way that we can think about this is angle POQ, which is this angle here, would be alternate exterior angles with this angle here. And those would be the same size. And then angle JLK, which is this one here, JLK, would be vertical angles to angle MLO, which means that they would be the same size. So we still have tools to use to figure out if they would be congruent. And lastly, I hope that you have a good week. I know that what we're doing is difficult, but I also know that you guys are capable of doing so much. So keep up your good work, and please let me know if you have any questions.